Great evening and welcome to another edition of Courageous Conversations. I am your host, James Rawson Jr., and I am excited and happy to have you with us tonight. I believe this is going to be life-changing, thought-provoking, and certainly awe-inspiring. And so I'm grateful that you are tuning in with us tonight. I'm going to give you a moment to do me a favor and love this and share this. We've got an amazing guest, very, very capable and distinguished young lady who's with us tonight, and I'm really excited. And I'll formally introduce her in a moment, but because she's here, Dr. D is here. Dr. D. Bell Williams is with us tonight. And so I want you to love and share this right now. Take a moment and do it right now. I mean, like right now. Just like do it right now. Everybody, do it. Before we get started, I don't want you to miss a word. I don't want you to miss a moment of this amazing conversation. It's going to be courageous, as always. You know, I ain't never scared. So we're going to talk about what we need to talk about, how we need to talk about it. So with an attempt, not just to be sensational or just to get a rise out of people or you, but in an attempt to help and to shed light on every particular theme and topic that we share. So I hope as you are with us tonight, share this, and share this. I'm sharing it right now. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm sharing it right now. So I'm going to give you a moment to share it. And for some reason, it's not acting right, but I'm going to share. Here we go. We're going to share this. James Cleveland said, "We are sharing."
Yes, James Cleveland.
We're sharing because the Lord's being good to us, you know. But we are sharing tonight. I want you to share. I want you to share this. Write a post. Join us now. I pray that you've been having a productive week so far and that the Lord has certainly proven himself to be who he is, and that is the God of all things, who is with us all, in us all, through us all. And so we are grateful to him. We are absolutely grateful to him. And it is, as I often say, it is of the Lord's mercies that we're not consumed. His compassion fail not, they're new every morning. And great is God's faithfulness. He's faithful, so I'm grateful. And I'm really, really grateful. Come on, y'all, share this. Come on, love it and share this. So our numbers can go up where they can be where we are used to them being. And if you're coming on, say hello, speak. I want to know that you're here. Say hi. Say hi. Say hi to everybody. Say hi. Great evening, Shima, Deacon Bruce, Dr. Samuel Lamont Hinton. I see you. Latanya, Germany. Come on, who else is here? I want to see you guys. I want to see y'all. I want to see you. Come on. I hope I didn't share. I hope I did share it to my personal page. Yep. Michelle, did I share it to my personal page? I hope I did. Corinne Nelson, great evening. Great evening. Tashika K. Curtis Pugh, my daughter. TK, Dr. TK Pugh. This is Florine Haynes. Bless you. Bless you. Pastor Bellamy, my dear sister. Bless you. She's got to be niece, yeah. Nephew, niece, and all y'all. Dr. Antoine Seawright is here. My man. That's my nephew. It's my boy.
Oh, wow.
He's the dude. He's my dude. Jason Moody, my little brother. Had a great conversation with him on Monday night. If you missed it, please go back and watch it. It was tremendous, transformational conversation. We had about ministry and mentorship. It was great. So go to Jason Moody's page in your spare time, your leisure, and you can watch it. It's still there, right, Jason? It's still there. All right. Ophelia Ford, bless you. Yep. Sister Veronica Thomas. All right. Well, again, great evening. We're so grateful that you have joined us for this, what I believe to be an all too important conversation to have, given the times in which we are living in. The Bible speaks of the description of the various sons of Jacob. And when it gets to Issachar, the description of Issachar, or the personality profile of Issachar, was that they understood the times, the sons of Issachar rather, and they understood the times and knew what Israel ought to be doing. And if there ever was a time for us as believers, non-believers, whoever you are, to have a sense of what's going on and understanding the times and understanding then what we ought to do and how we ought to answer and to respond to the current conditions of our world, that time is now. And so I'm grateful that we're going to have a very courageous and candid conversation about the educational inequalities and the disparities that plague our educational system, not just in South Carolina, but all over. And as a result, a generation is being underprivileged, underserved, and certainly unprepared for the challenges of the present and the future. And I'm blessed tonight to have with me Dr. D. Bell Williams, who is a global educational consultant, award-winning author, world-class speaker, and transformational leader. Dr. D is the owner of Dr. D Unlimited LLC, an educational leadership firm where she has packaged her 19-year career as an educator into a trusted brand, as well as positioned herself as an educational and international community influencer. Her company specializes in coaching and cultivating transformational leaders in education, business, and ministry. Dr. D is the pioneering creator of the culture-focused teaching system, a research-proven methodology that helps to retain educators in the classroom by helping them build relationships with the students and families that they serve. Her book, Culture-Focused Teaching, a simple system to escape classroom management disaster and fall in love with teaching again, became, as it were, a bestseller in 1 week after its release. That's phenomenal.
Thank you.
In October of 2020, Dr. D received an International African American History and Genealogy Award for the Education Academic Nonfiction category. As a certified Clifton's Strength Assessment Leadership Development Trainer, Dr. D aids schools, corporations, and community organizations in learning and understanding their leadership strength and minimizing their blind spots so that they can experience maximum growth and progression, both personally and professionally. Dr. D has an educational doctorate degree in leadership, policy, and administration, and continues to add value to her field of expertise through writing, speaking challenging educational policy, and creating professional development courses for educators and community leaders. Dr. D has traveled extensively throughout the United States, Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Caribbean, training on CFT, which is, in fact, what she's part of, and has enrolled numerous educators in her online education and leadership courses. Dr. D has worked with several local, national, and international organizations over the past 10 years. She is an active member of SC Emerge America, the talented 10th 2021 class of the Junior League of Columbia, and currently serves on the Grant Review Committee for the Central Carolina Community Foundation. In 2020, Dr. D was named amongst the top 20 under 40 South Carolina leaders by the Thomas Group in the South Carolina Black Pages magazine. She was the fall 2020 HBCU magazine alumni spotlight, where she also serves as a brand ambassador for the company. She is also a brand ambassador for Vogue Me Eyewear. I'm sorry, is that Chic?
Chic, New York.
Chic New York clothing. So she's got some sense and some style. Dr. D is the owner of the Unlimited Edition t-shirt brand, a brand for the entire family, where she sells t-shirts for men, women, children, and onesies for babies. I need to talk to you about that. Her message is simple. You were born to be unlimited. Dr. D resides in famously hot Columbia, South Carolina, where she is married and enjoys traveling, reading, spending time with her Yorkie poodle, Jordan. Will you please, Courageous Conversations audience, please welcome with me the incomparable Dr. D. Greetings.
Greetings. That's a lot. It's a mouthful, but I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me, Pastor Elson, on tonight. It is indeed a pleasure to be on Courageous Conversations. Anyone who knows me, and there are plenty of people who are watching who do know me, know that this is my lane. I don't mind having courageous and or confrontational conversations.
Good. We are certainly excited that you're here with us tonight, and we're going to jump right in. Let me just breathe a word of prayer, because we acknowledge him in all of our ways, even when we got to talk about tough things. And he promises to direct our very path. Father, thank you for the moment that you have created for us, for this is the day that you've made, and we will rejoice and be glad in it. Thank you for this season that we're in, for in all things you told us to give thanks. And so we thank you for helping us to navigate through these uncharted waters and this rough terrain. And I pray, God, that as we share together tonight, that something will be said to encourage, inspire, to challenge, to motivate, and to change us to who we should be and how we ought to operate. And we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, this is a mountain of a topic that we want to address and somehow get some insight about the educational inequities and inequalities that we experience and see. I think that for me, the impetus behind wanting to have this kind of conversation is I'm so concerned about, Dr. D, I'm so concerned about our kids. I'm so concerned about what's going to happen. Bad enough what is happening, but what is going to continue to happen if we don't really get a grip and a handle. I've got a 5-year-old grandson and a 1-year-old grandson, and I have great concern about what will the world be like when they are of age, and as they come through, what will it be like? What will they be prepared? Will the system offer them preparation that will cause them to be productive? Those are things that concern me greatly. And I see kids now falling by the wayside, even pre-pandemic. So I've got a few questions I want to ask you, and you can, we could just flow with them. The first thing I want to ask is, what were the existing problems of the educational process pre-pandemic?
When they talk about the educational processes, I think that for South Carolina specifically, I have such a love for my state, but there's so many issues in our state. And in education, it goes back several decades. And one of the things that I like to really talk about as it relates to that, just that broken mechanism, is our ability to really embrace and have a rigorous curriculum that actually will help our children learn best in the way in which they were created to learn. And there are different modalities that teachers, of course, have to have experience and background in order to actually fortify that type of learning environment. But what's challenging with the state of South Carolina goes all the way back. It goes beyond our individual school district curriculum. It goes beyond just what's happening in individual schools. It goes all the way back to our state constitution regarding education. And in our state's constitution, South Carolina, in the Constitution says that it is only responsible for providing a minimally adequate education to our children.
Wow.
And right. So when you look at what our state says is, okay, what our state says, this is law. And even though this system is failing our children, when challenges or questions are brought up by individual school districts and individual schools, the state says, well, we're doing the law. We're obeying the law. And so for me, even it doesn't matter how many types of curriculum changes you adopt. It doesn't matter how much you prepare your educators to go into the classroom. If you are preparing them under the auspice of this law, then we're basically serving our students, serving our children, and serving our families from the bare minimal perspective. So even before the pandemic, which revealed and really pulled the covers off, not just in South Carolina, but the entire United States, of our education system, looking at the individual states and what it requires within the Constitution, stating what it should be doing for our schools, is really where the rubber meets the road, which takes me to, of course, and we'll probably talk about this later on in the conversation, but that question is very loaded, but it goes back to the origin of how we're educating our children here in the state. And we have to talk more about representation in the legislative component, where our state house representatives and our senators are now putting education at the forefront and keeping it at the forefront. And I know we're in the midst of a pandemic, but our educational system has been a pandemic for quite some time.
Well, wait. You're telling me that this problem is systemic and it goes back generations and decades, and that the actual law, what's allowed in this state, is for the minimum educational offering, and it's fine. So yes. Is that based on race or just across the board?
Well, of course, when we start to break down those inequities, you're always going to find different subgroups that, of course, are going to benefit more from, whether it's private school, whether it's, there's being more money funneled into specific school districts because where they're zoned and where they're located, you're going to have that. And again, it breaks down into looking at those inadequacies in those areas, though that's the law statewide. So even your best schools, and statistics show recently here, I think Greenville County statistically has been ranked as the top ranking school districts within our state in Greenville County areas. And so you take the best of South Carolina and you put them in other states, put them along with other states, and we're still subpar as it relates to being able to be academically groomed for global learning and global, actually having that experience from a global perspective. So regardless of whether you're in a wealthy school district in South Carolina, matched with some schools across this nation, we will still fall subpar. And we've never really reached above 50, maybe 56 within 46, I'm sorry, within the state. We've always been between 50 and maybe 46 on, as it relates to the 50 states in the United States in the education on that totem pole. So we've always been in the bottom, and it always goes back to what's being provided, what the law says we should do, and then really tackling that so that our system can really change from the inside out.
Okay, I am, this is a courageous conversation. I'm so mad already. I don't know what I'm trying to collect myself. because what it says to me is at the top of our class, we are still below and subpar in our ability to compete with other states. I'm from New York, and I will be honest, when I came here and got involved in the educational process, as a matter of fact, one of my early jobs, I worked in the educational system, and I was flabbergasted uh, to see what I saw in the classrooms and with kids. And I didn't teach, but I was one of the resource, faculty members, and I was amazed. I was amazed at how little attention was given to the educational process, and I was just amazed at the level of homework. I remember my sons being young and looking at some of the homework and going, "You got to be kidding me," not realizing, not realizing. TK says we are 43rd in the nation.
We can't get out of the 40s. We've been in the 40s since I've been in school, and I'll be 42 this year. Since I've been in school, we've been in the 40s.
Wow. This is
Yes.
scary.
Yes.
This is scary, and this needs to be addressed first and foremost. So now you have the subpar educational standards that are considered okay. Then you've got teachers who are underpaid,
Right.
who are basically babysitting, and when they cannot relate, they just throw the kids out to class. Our kids are in real trouble.
Absolutely. And we can't take away, and you brought up something a few minutes ago, we can't take away the systemic racist practices and the racist issues within our school systems, right? So, Pastor, you shared in the beginning, that I wrote this book, Culture Focused Teaching.
Yeah.
So I want to share with the audience a little bit about, why I wrote that book, and
Please
it's
do.
going to go into this question of talking about systemic racist practices. The book is called Culture Focused Teaching. And the reason why I wrote the book, I went to a walkout. It was May 1st, 2019. And it was when teachers across South Carolina and various neighboring states came, went to the State House on a Tuesday, left our classrooms and decided, enough was enough. We were going to make our voices known. And in the first time in my experience as an educator, and at that time I was 17th year in education. So in my 17 years, it was my first time really seeing teachers really take ownership of their pain and their passion and really doing something about it. So when they went those steps, I was both excited and grieved at the same time, because I was excited that educators were now beginning to speak up for themselves, but I was also grieved about how many teachers were leaving the classroom. And at the start of the 2019-2020 school year, we had 555 vacancies in the state of South Carolina. And we had a great deal of those vacancies in Florence County, Charleston County. Those were a large number of where those vacancies were. And I began to just wonder, why were teachers just abandoning the field? Why were they leaving the classroom? And so I started doing my own study, started doing some research, doing some peer review studies, and I'm finding out that we have to look at the overall perspective nationally, which affects every state. And the U.S. Department of Education did a report that shared about at that time, it was 88% of teachers that were in public schools that were predominantly populated by students of color were identified as white or non-Black educators. And of course, the Black educators were what's left of that number. And then as time moved on, they projected by the year 2024, which is only 3 years from now, that 92% of the population of teachers and educators within our schools would be white or non-Black, because Black students weren't going into the education field, and that number was minimized. And however, when you look on the flip side, the numbers are drastically different when it comes to suspension rates, test scores, and things of that nature regarding Black and brown children. So we got to start looking at who's in the classroom and their ability to relate to who's in the classroom. Because
Yeah.
if majority of the students are Black and brown, and
Yeah.
majority of the teachers, especially in grades K through 12, are white or non-Black, there's an automatic culture gap. And then now we got to start looking at the systemic practices that are happening in the classroom, that are causing our children not to perform well in the classroom, and also look at why are they suspended at alarming rates versus their white peers. So we have to start looking at all of that and saying, hey, there's a cultural gap here. There's a cultural divide that we need to really bring together if educators who are going to continue to teach in Black or, highly populated schools with highly populations of Black and brown students, if you're going to continue to teach in these pivotal grades, K through 8 is very crucial. Those are the formative years. And so if you're going to continue, you have to continue to either want to or deal with some of our biases that we have coming into the classroom and learn about the population of students that you are teaching. Otherwise, our children are going to continue to fall through the gap. And like you said earlier, your grandsons, and those that are watching, if you have children coming up, it is a grave concern if that gap continues to widen like that, because if we got to deal with that. And so I deal with a lot of that in that text, where I'm helping white educators or non-Black educators look at some of the lived experiences of Black and brown children coming into the classroom, and begin to build relationships with those students, because you can't teach them if you can't reach them. And if you're not reaching them, then you're trying to dismiss them. And that's why we have these alarming statistical rates of our children being kicked out of school, or, going into in-school suspension, or failing at alarming rates. I always tell people this: there is nothing wrong with our children. There's this, I put in parentheses, air quotes, not parentheses, air quotes, that there is, and I fight people with this all the time, so I'm ready for it. It's okay, because I know I know my stuff. But there is no achievement gap in our schools. They've been having to go around in this rat race. I've been teaching for almost 20 years, and they've been teaching us about, closing the achievement gap. There's an opportunity and an educator equity workforce gap, where there are not enough representation of teachers who look like the students to help bring in that lived experience. And of course, the whole curriculum aspect is another aspect that we have to bring in. And so the other half of the book, I open up helping the teachers kind of deal with their own biases, talk about some systemic practices in our curriculum. But then we got to look at changes in the curriculum, accuracy of history, helping our students understand what African-American history really looks like. Everything has been tainted and flawed. It has this Eurocentric perspective that has been laced over our education. And then, students are waking up, during the pandemic, parents were able to teach their children accurate history. So now they're going back into the classroom with this antiquated curriculum, and they're challenging the teachers. And so we now have to look at changes in our curriculum that reflect accurate history of the student population that you're serving. So there's so many moving parts that, we have to look into making adequate changes regarding, so that we can really create a system, or to be honest with you, we actually need to really debunk the system we have and start from scratch. So that's sort of that's my take on it. Like, some things you just can't reform. You just really have to tear it down and build back up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Brother McKinney said something that speaks the sentiments of my heart. I want to bring this up. I just believe we need to teach our own kids. I think that integration, I understood the sentiment of the country and the nation at the time. I understand. I'm a bit of a historical buff, so I do understand the psychological and the sociological ramifications of the need to be integrated. I understand we shall overcome. I have a dream that one day, black, brown kids would sit down with white, I get all of that. Sorry, I do. However, when it comes to this, I believe with all my heart that our kids are best served by people who they can relate to and can relate to them on a level that, and of course, I don't have to tell the educator this, that speak the language.
Absolutely.
I think it goes into religion. I mean, I could spend a whole lot of time talking about that, but we're dealing with education, and I believe that there is a difference between that white teacher saying, Johnny, would you refrain from speech and sit down and focus your attention on the blackboard as we continue in the lesson, and a black teacher saying, Johnny, sit your behind down. You don't want me to tell your mama or whatever. Pay
Right.
attention while I'm talking. And coming over to him and bamming his hand or whatever needs to happen. I don't know if that's a bad thing.
I'm gonna kind of roll back and then roll forward on that comment. I couldn't agree more. I'm a bit of a history. I minored in history, so I'm definitely a bit of a history buff myself. And I love history, and one of the things that after going to college, entering into the field, becoming a researcher, doing my own studies, and like you and I think Mr. McKinney said, you find that our ability and responsibility of teaching our own children was actually the greatest aspect that we had. Yeah. And I understand, like you said, the intention behind integration, but I'm here to tell you that as a practicing educator, we never really left segregation. We're in what's called de facto segregation. And what that simply means is if I zone a school in a specific way, in a specific neighborhood where majority of the parents that live in that neighborhood have certain types of jobs and income that are going to garner or attract this type of group, then guess what? That school is now going to reflect that type and that group. So although they're not saying, oh, we don't want the Black kids to come here or the Hispanic kids to come here, but what that de facto segregation is, we're going to push this school and model it for this particular group of people that live in this area. And it's happening all over our state. And of course it goes into a lot of the historical aspect. When we talk about voting, you start hearing things like gerrymandering, but it's not gerrymandering in education, it's de facto segregation. And so it's the same thing where you're pushing and you want to place pieces on the chess puzzle, the chessboard, where you want it to go to reflect a certain population. So we left segregation. We have the integration laws, we have these different things where we're all able to go to school, but there always is a way when there's an agenda. There's always a way for that agenda to be perpetuated. So that's one of the things that I couldn't agree more. I think that we sold ourselves short in the name of trying to get along or trying to become ingrained and not really understanding the value that we had by pulling together. And I know that there were instances in our history where, there were Black communities built that had successful schools, that had successful banks, they had their own hospitals, they had their own everything. And of course, we can look at history. We can look at your Rosewoods, your Eatonville in Florida, your Tulsa, Oklahoma. We can look at those things and we know that when they happen, it was always something to come around to destroy those things. But I believe that it was still necessary for us to continue to educate our own children so that we control the narrative. And that's the most important part, is about controlling the narrative so that our children can see what they can become and not necessarily be told what to think or how to think, but actually learn, about themselves first. And then about everyone else in the world. There's this aspect of culture, that we teach called windows, mirrors and windows. And so it's this aspect of allowing students to learn about themselves, looking in the mirror first, and then looking out into the window, looking out of the window and seeing the rest of the world and how you fit into that world, or how that world fits into your perspective of the world. And so we look at that as a teaching mechanism when we're helping non-Black educators understand how, to teach African American students, because for so long the curriculum has been look on the outside and then find out about who you are. And so that's one of the things that we use as a modality. But it is very important for our parents, our guardians, those that are raising children. It is imperative that you become their first teacher. One of the reasons why I am so aware of education is because my grandmother was a teacher. So I was raised around education, and my grandmother raised me. I'm what's called a child. I'm an ACE child, what would have been considered an ACE child, a child who grew up with adverse childhood experiences. So my grandparents raised me due to challenges in my home with my parents. So, I learned a lot, and they were very active in the community and very adamant about Black culture, about learning, and all of these different things, about knowing who I was as a Black American. So I grew up around a lot of that, which fortifies the passion that I have now. And so I think it's so important that we realize that some of the stuff that we thought changed never really changed. They just changed the names of it. And it's so important, more now than ever, that we take control over our child's learning.
Wow. That's so good. Mark Smith makes a comment that I want you to address. I'll read it. That's why I believe that the best option for our future is to cross-culturally zone schools. This will allow all individuals to learn and gain an understanding of other cultures, as well as the playing field, I guess in playing field, in providing the same level of focus on education across the state and communities. Before you respond, as I read that comment, I thought to my childhood. Of course, I'm from New York, and I grew up in Mount Vernon, a small town called Mount Vernon, New York, 4 square miles. And I remember at a time leaving Graham Elementary School and going to Pennington School, which was on the other side of the of the city, of the town, and we were bused there. And all of the homes were, the school sat in the middle of one of those neighborhoods. And I remember the feeling of getting off that bus like we were, I don't want to say slaves, but it was my first impression of what segregation and racial disparity was, because the Black kids rode the bus while the white kids were running across the street home. And the attitude of the teachers reflected, why are y'all here? My father had to check the principal, Dr. Zucker. I never forget this as long as I live, because he had a big ring, and he plucked me in the head with it for doing something. But whatever I did not warrant him plucking me in my head. And my father at the time, hallelujah, who did not play anything like that, came to the school to communicate to him, you don't touch my son. Consequently, I got out of that school, went back to the school in my neighborhood, had a wonderful elementary experience. And so I don't know if it was an experiment. I don't know what they were trying to find out. Can Black kids coincide with white kids in a white neighborhood? I don't know what the deal was. All I know was that it was a very bad and intimidating environment for me. It was uncomfortable to the point where I don't think I did well. Now that I remember, I think it was for the gifted and the more highly intellectual kids. Let's put them over here. So I probably was in that percentile, but it didn't pan out like that. So I'm not sure of the cross-cultural zoning issue. I'm not really sure of that. I worked in the school system here in Columbia. I remember working at Hand Middle School, And of course, if you know anything about Columbia, then you know where Han sits in the Rosewood Shannon area. And then kids would come from other parts of the city, and they were treated a certain way. But
I
again, your point about being zoned for a particular demographic, it was sitting in Rosewood Shandon.
right.
So the intent was, we're going to get the resources for our kids. These
Right.
other kids can maybe benefit, but it ain't really for them. You know, the Booster Club used to raise thousands of dollars, you know, that kind of thing. You know, I just remember those kind of things. And so speak to that. So speak to that.
Well, and I think I kind of covered it in the comment that I said before, especially when we start looking at the research behind mirrors and windows,
Yes.
because it's especially for the Black community.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we've been so disadvantaged, marginalized. It's been a brutal history
Mm-hmm.
here, in our country, and it may come across self-centered, selfish, perhaps, but I think it's very, very important that, again, the focus remain on how do we continue to educate our children about themselves first.
Mm-hmm.
And as they gain that knowledge, bringing in the aspect of how, what we bring fits into the world. Again, here's the window now being open, and how do what I look like and what I'm experiencing fit into the world of, what's happening in the rest of the world. And now I'm opening myself to learn more about others, but definitely starting with myself first. I think that for so long, our children have been made to learn about everybody else
Mm-hmm.
before really learning the truth about their own culture, their own background, their own ways of learning. Because believe it or not, when you really go down and start to really study the way that Africans learn, and the history behind the way that we actually learn throughout the centuries, it's very different than the Eurocentric model of the American education system.
Wow.
So,
Give me an example, because that sounds good to me. So help me. I,
absolutely. So,
I'm all ears.
when we're talking about the way that, let's talk language, right?
Okay.
So that was one of the first things that uh, when our ancestors, when they came through the time of enslavement, that's the first thing that they had to really capitalize on was language. How do we take all of these people from the Yoruba tribe, from the Mende tribe, from the Mandinka
Mm-hmm.
tribe? How do we communicate and learn this other language that's here? And
Wow.
so now we learn to say words and code words that now build in its own language, which after years and years and years becomes, what's the African American language, which we're still trying to get a full validation within universities to study African American language, because the breakdown, we understand it, and it's a subgroup of American English, just like any other subgroup, like Hispanic, English, or with Spanglish, aspects of that, where there's certain
Yo,
words,
X-ray. Yeah, I got
right?
it.
Things of that nature. Like, we know what we're saying. Who that?
Yes, yes,
Who
yeah, yeah,
that? Who is that? Yes,
yeah.
we know there's no verb, but who that? We understand that, to make it work, because it was a whole nother language that we had to learn on top of different dialects from the different tribes that were brought over
Uh,
through the Atlantic slave trade. So
wow.
it's so much there, instead of being in the classroom and I'm speaking, and just like Michelle said, the Geechee Gullah language, and I'm speaking, and you're telling me that's not proper English.
Right.
I'm not English. I'm in America, but I'm not from England. So, this comes from the backdrop of what's happened to the language for our people. And so
Wow.
I understand what I'm saying. And just because it doesn't sound like you doesn't mean it's wrong. Just
Well,
because
that's powerful, because I just want to interrupt you to make this point. I'm from New York. I'm from the North.
Mhm.
And when I moved south, and I start talking to all of these college educated, degree toting people, and they are talking, and this this verbiage that they use, I go, what school gave you a passing grade? How did you ain't no way in the world you graduated talking like that? Because again, the North, we didn't have all of that because we were a little bit more removed from the language of the South. And so I'm gonna be honest, it got me into some, I'm sure some people were offended, but I wasn't being funny. I just couldn't understand. You can't be educated talking like this. You just can't, ain't no way in the world. Ain't no way in the world. I'm listening and I'm going, ain't no way. You ain't got no letters behind your name. You didn't get through high school talking like this.
And some of them are the most educated, right? Like,
No, what in the world? What is this?
But you know what happened though during the migration of when blacks really started migrating north, and one of the things that I loved, I don't know if you saw the documentary of the Black Church, but one of the things that they implemented in there that stood out to me and it connected to this whole migration, because everything that is happened, in our lives, and everything that we partake in, whether it's religion, education, socioeconomic, everything is a part of that entire movement of coming out of the, previous, enslavement, and now trying to figure out our place here in America, right? So all that deals with education, language, religion, all that good stuff. And so when they talked about how the shifting and the shaping of at that time, I'll use this term loosely, but of the Negro of the North, and how even in the church, there was this level of sophistication that was being brought in to, in that area as they were up north. And it did cause this separation because remember, many of them came from the South. And so it was just this level of, where things are being done differently. It's a different culture. It's a different way. We're even changing the way we practice or express our religious practices in this way, and so separated that. And it's the same thing in education. The same thing happened is these cultural separations and subgroup, within, even within the African American community, because, where I'm from, like literally, and those that are on whomever met my family know that I'm probably the one out of the family you probably understand the most. Most of my friends, when they met my father in college, we would be talking, in the car, and they would look at me like, please interpret, like explain. My father is from northwestern Orangeburg County, little small town, Norway, South Carolina. And then, we have family from that really migrated from like the Southwest. You got New Orleans, we have Texas, and so we have all of those, right? So we have a lot of that. And so when I'm around my family, they'll tell me quickly, don't come around here with all of that proper talk, like don't come around here with that. And so I have to, I will code switch, because I know that they're not with that, and I understand that. And but it's fine with me because I know how to code switch. It's one of the things that I was taught early because I was a trained speaker from youth, and so I was taught early the importance of code switching, not just within my own culture, but amongst other cultures as well. So so that's that thing, and it goes into our classrooms. And again, if you have the representation of educators who do not look like our students, they're going to see something wrong with what they're saying and how they're speaking and how they're expressing themselves. And just because a child speaks a certain way does not mean they're not interpreting the lesson the way it needs to be interpreted, because they can give you the results. They may not speak it the way that you're asking them to, and there's nothing wrong with that. But again, if the representation, and remember, I talked earlier about the formative years. K through 8 are our formative years. So if a child in the classroom with a teacher that's constantly telling them you're speaking wrong, why do you sound like that? Why don't you say it like, enunciate it like this? And we're not against speaking in articulation. That's not what we're saying. We're not saying that our children should be able to articulate words properly. Hear me clearly. That's not what we're saying. But when it comes to dialect and when it comes to understanding the environment where that child is being reared and being raised and where they're enamored with this language, it doesn't reflect their intellect. And that's where we've seen a lot of discrimination with our children in the classroom, which is what I was talking about, like, how African American children learn differently. Even mathematics, there's a different system in how we calculate mathematically, with our children, and they keep changing it, which is very strange to me because, math is a universal language, right? So it's going to be the same, however you flip it. But they keep changing the process of how, the children are learning math, because during the pandemic, I had parents reaching out. My child needs a tutor. They're doing math differently from the way that I did it when I was in school. And I said, differently. And so I started investigating, because I'm not in the K-12 class, I'm at the college level, which I work with K-12 educators. And so I had to go back and see the change of what they were doing. And it is very different from the way that in which I learned how to do mathematics. And again, it's causing this another shift in how, our children are able to learn and to change. So to change with that dynamic. So again, that's what I help educators to learn, that it's not that these children can't learn. They can absolutely learn. You have to meet them. You have to learn about who they are. You have to meet them where they are. The example, I'll give two examples and what I mean by that. You said something earlier about your father and engaging, with that principle. I had a parent share with me on a platform. I was speaking, and I had her give her input, and her son had a white teacher, and the white teacher was giving the son instructions and directives in a way in which he was not responding. She kept asking him in the class to do things and, respond a certain way. So she finally did a parent conference, after a while going back and forth. And the parent finally asked the teacher, what are you asking him? Like, what are you telling him to do? And she said, well, I'm asking him to, have a seat, or I'm asking him to, move to the back of the classroom or to the side or change seats. She said, in my household, I don't ask him anything. I tell him what he needs to do. And so that revealed that cultural dynamic of how, because basically this teacher was probably educating like she would educate her own children who are white children. Well, that's not the way this child responded, because at home, mama tells you, daddy tells you what you're going to do. There's no asking. We're telling you. She said, I give you my permission in front of his face in that child meeting that you tell him. You don't have to be demeaning or degrading. And she made sure she was very clear, but just tell him what you need him to do, because that's how he responds. So that's, again, having those candid conversations with educators and with parents about how to appropriately, deal with your child. And so, that's another thing. The other example, regarding culture, this was about 2015. I saw this demonstration from a teacher here in Richland School District 1. And this was, no, not 2015, I'm sorry, 2005. And so at this time, CDs, we were still, watching CDs, DVDs, listening to music on CDs. And the teacher was a Black math teacher. And the score at this particular school was the lowest in the school district. And they told this teacher, I don't know what you're going to be able to do. You're going into Mission Impossible. These children cannot learn in this. It was a high school here in Richland School District 1. And they told him these children cannot learn math. Absolutely cannot learn. They failed every year. He went in, and a lot of the kids in this particular school were from a very marginalized environment. They were from the hood. They just, this is just where they were from. So he understood that. He was a Black math teacher, went in there, he understood that. And so he was teaching them about, money, making money, investing, and also, making sure you get ROI, return on investment, how companies work. And so he began to talk about kids burning CDs, because they were always talking about burning CDs and selling them in the schools. And so when he broke down the mathematic component of, well, if you were a company, because some of y'all said you want to own your own company. If you were a company and your role or your job was to sell CDs, but have people that are now copying and making CDs and making the music, printing it on a CD, and your company is losing money. Like, how would you feel about that? So he began to change their minds about burning CDs and copyright issues and different things of that nature. So he brought the lesson and made it relative. And so he started working with them from a cultural perspective, had the highest test scores, standardized test scores that year for the last 8 years of that time that he was in that classroom.
Wow.
Just by connecting with their background, connecting with what they knew. It wasn't that they couldn't learn math. It's just that whomever was teaching it just did not connect with how they understood. And
wow,
so,
that's so powerful. That is so powerful. And I think it's really at the core of Jesus's ministry. He was always relevant. He's talking to farmers. He says a sower went out to sow. He's talking to fishermen. He's talking to them about nets and, and so I think that at the end of the day, we need to, as you said, tear it all down and build a model that is relevant and relative to who it is that we are seeking to educate. I have a question. I saw a question, I should say, and I want to address it. Dr. Williams, I saw a major change with single gender classes. Students were more focused in this environment. What do you think?
I think that's really case by case. Single gender classes, I've experienced single gender classes when I taught in a school district in the Calhoun-Orangeburg area, and we did single gender freshman academy at that particular school, and it was actually a good turnout. Like that really turned out to be a good way. Again, we only did it in the freshman academy just to see. I think that year I was there was a pilot to test to see if this would actually work. And there are some good results from that. I think that it should be done in that manner. I don't think that the entire school experience should be a gender classroom based for the entire middle school or elementary or high school. I think that if we do the experiment in pockets and in, I think, years that are reflective of the changeover in nature, such as elementary kids going into middle school or middle school going into high school. So doing single gender classes at those split ages just to help with some of the hormone issues, some of the brain development changes that are happening, some of the social cues that are starting to develop at that nature. I think that those are great places to do that, not necessarily making that the experience for the entire duration of middle, elementary, or high school.
So technically, it should be 6th grade and 9th grade.
I think so. Fifth, eighth, fifth. I'm sorry, 5th and 9th. I think
5th and 9th.
Fifth, because you're going into 6th for middle, for some schools, and then you're going into 9th grade high school. So I think like those are two good spaces to, at least if that's a conversation that someone is having in their schools, because again, the social cues are changing, hormones are changing, the social development, academic development, those are critical and pivotal ages.
Wow, that's so good. I've always thought, and I have studied, there is a particular school in Chicago. I met the guy, Dr. I'm looking right at him. Is his name Kelly? But he's responsible for that pilot, that all male school, and the results were outstanding. As a matter of fact, there was a program in Orangeburg for a couple of years past. I can't remember the man's name is Mr. Brown, who was running it, and I was astounded by some of the results of to watch those young men that I even knew, and I've spoke there a couple of times. So it was quite rewarding to see them develop, and so I think it is a tremendous model. But you have stirred me, because it's been a little it's stirring, and it's also motivating, because I really do believe that there is something wrong with the model. Something is wrong with the pattern. I preached a message some time ago, I think, and it has to deal with the pattern, build according to pattern. The Lord told the children of Israel, as relates to the tabernacle, to build it according to the pattern that I give you. And there will
Mm.
I meet thee, and there will I commune with thee. He gave them a pattern. The problem is always in the pattern. If the pattern is faulty, then the dress is not going to come out right. You know,
Right.
when I was young, my mother and aunt would go down to the sewing store and get these Butterich and Simplicity. You don't know nothing about that, but these patterns, and they would lay them out on the kitchen table, and they cut and they put it on the material, and they would cut it
I
according
know.
to the pattern.
Yes, I know. I've cut pattern myself.
So
See,
you
my
understand
old
what I'm
cousin,
saying?
Pastor Robinson. Remember, my grandmother raised me.
That's right. You did say that. So yeah, you do know. And you know, and I would have to, me and my cousin help, you know, lay them out and carry it on, and they were cut according to the pattern. And if the dress didn't come out right, it wasn't because something was wrong with the fabric. It was because something was faulty with the pattern, or you didn't cut it properly. And so to hear you talk about the fact that our Constitution is okay with subpar education, this is the pattern. We need to throw this pattern away, or we
Absolutely.
need to petition our lawmakers and say, you know, what are y'all gonna do about this? Because we really, because all of the conferences, and I have educators in our church, in our ministry, and people that I just know. I mean, y'all go to more conferences and workshops than a little bit. I mean, Myrtle Beach gets all y'all's money. School district money is always a conference on this, a conference on that. And I'm saying to myself, with all of this training and development, what is really going on that really can be seen in the life of the children if the pattern already is faulty?
Right.
Let me ask you then. We're in the pandemic, and the pandemic has now revealed a lot of things in so many areas of our lives. But educationally, what does the pandemic now bring to light that needs, like our laser sharp attention?
I think that for education, the pandemic brought to light the need to really, like you said, do away with the current constitution of our state
Mm,
and develop a new curriculum that reflects the history, the accurate history, and the reflection of the knowledge that our children need that's built into the curriculum so that our children can be able to compete globally. And when we start to look at not only did the pandemic, reveal healthcare disparities, look at how many children and parents were at a disadvantage when we had to immediately go to remote learning, and we were in places like a Norway, where I'm from, a rural town where there was such an internet desert, even here in Richland County and spaces like Winsboro and different places where they're internet desert, even in the city where, there are housing projects where the internet is just not working. If you got 5 and 6 people on one internet,
absolutely.
port coming in, like we saw so many different disparities that affected education and how we were just underprepared to really handle that. So again, I think that we need to begin to petition our lawmakers. There is someone that sits in the seat of our state house, whether they sit in the Senate side or the House of Representatives side, that represents everybody that's on this comment section and everybody who's watching. There is somebody who represents you that sit
Yeah,
in that seat where you're from, where you're teaching, where your children are learning. And this is the prime time to start making those phone calls. We can't knock down doors right now until that, till we get this COVID, kind
sure.
of under control.
Yeah.
They've been kind of keeping us at a distance from the state house. Yeah, I've made a couple appointments that had to be rearranged because of some of the other laws and bills that they've had going on from January and February. They've been busy up there, lots of stuff happening in the state house, but it's definitely prime time. And this is the time to amplify Black voices, to share why we're discontented and what needs to happen and what needs to change. I admonish everybody, because it can't just be the representatives. If we just leave it up to them, then it'll never get done. The Constitution of the
Right.
United States says we the people. So it
Wow.
is the people that we have to step into those places and demand those that represent us actually represent us and represents the needs and the desires and the issues that we're facing. And so I have positioned myself to stand on the front line from the education perspective. And, you know, when I started getting involved here in Columbia several years ago with politics, I started learning who represented the district, the council or the county district where I live. I started learning who represented me in the Senate and in the House of Representatives. I started making phone calls. I've had meetings. I've met with the senator that represents District 77 where I live. I've met my county representative in District 7 where I live. I've also met my Senate district where I live. So you have to start digging in and learning about these people and how they represent, because they are the persons that will change the laws that will reflect the changes that we'll need in our education system. That's where I have positioned myself. And so in order for these changes to happen, parents, even students can get involved. Your students who are interested in the changes in their schools, help them to learn about who represents them at a legislative level so that their voices can be heard. Your children can write letters. They can begin to talk about the challenges that they're experiencing in their schools, so that the more we knock on the door, the more we send letters, is when we can start to at least see some of those, you know, changes at least being heard, so that some things can begin to be implemented, torn apart, and you know, instituted. But it's going to happen only if we, the people, actually make the noise.
Wow. Wow. This is so good. Dr. D, this is tremendous. I'm enjoying this conversation. I don't want to hold you all night, and I don't want to get in trouble with Mr. Williams or anybody else. You know, I don't want to, or Jordan, you know, for that. However,
Jordan might give you more trouble than Mr. Williams. He's spoiled.
I get it. But I do want to ask you this, because this is something, of course, as you know, I pastor in Orangeburg County, and great concern for all of this. You know, not just the Sunday morning experience. For me, I believe that church and kingdom building and kingdom ministry and kingdom life consists of every day of the week. It consists of a total consumption of one's life. And so I really do look to help in this educational process in my area. We're thinking, and then we're in the process now and looking into constructing a virtual learning center, putting together a virtual learning center to aid parents and children in this process, which again, who may be in an internet desert, or who just don't have, as it were, the means, or not so much the means, but the wherewithal to help. You know, that mama's home trying to work, and the kids are home, and math is looking like, you know, Chinese, and all those things are going on. And I just believe that there ought to be some kind of virtual learning centers where kids can come and get some help, get some, you know, while they're online, but be monitored, and give them a sense of normalcy and what they're used to and accustomed. Do you agree that that is a good thing in this space, or is it not? And I understand the CDC, you know, of course, with all the guidelines being adhered to as it relates to COVID-19, but I'm afraid. I guess what I'm getting at is, I'm so afraid that when the pandemic lifts, you know, whenever that is, or however, our kids going to be so far behind. Now, there are kids who are self-motivated, and, you know, they cool at home in front of the computer. But then there are some kids who are logging on and going back to bed.
Right.
You know,
right.
Or who don't understand how to navigate through this process, and then don't have parents that they weren't helping them before the pandemic.
Right.
They certainly can't help them now.
Right.
So, you know, help me, give me some direction about that.
Absolutely. More than happy to give you some direction. I do want to start by debunking a myth that kind of went wild during the pandemic. And that was our kids are going to be so far behind. And statistics show that a child literally can experience a deficit as it relates to having a teacher teaching them and there being learning and teaching and learning happening in a certain system, whether it's school, whether it's online. And it could be a matter of 12 to 18 months. But when when they're put back into a learning model that has support from, the teacher or the parent or the guardian, they will catch up quicker than what it seemed like they were behind. So we typically in education overteach. And what we mean by that is we always are trying to push the envelope. That's why we like to make sure and push to ensure that our children are working ahead of grade level so that if something happens, let's say it's not a pandemic, suppose a child gets a debilitating illness and they can't be in an actual school, but they can still learn, but there still needs to be processes in place to make sure that there is not like a large degree of learning loss. And so what happens, studies have shown that you can have a child out of school for a year. Doesn't really equate so much to our pre-K kindergarten. It's a different conversation. But for those children that have been actively in school, as long as they have support when they're back into the learning environment, such as a teacher who's being patient, who's, taking a specific pace, understanding that they've been out, or parents who are going to work with them and help them, be an assistant, or like yourself, being a pastor and providing supplementary opportunities for them to learn in other spaces, such as coming to the ministry and doing some online work. As long as there's structure and support, that child will not lose. And so there's this, I think it just kind of went wild. And again, it went wild based on a lack of understanding. And because this is the work that I do, and I basically research and study statistics all the time, based on the work that I do as a researcher, I understand that we're not in that type of danger zone only if we don't provide the support. And many of our school districts have been doing just that. They have provided the support structure to help, our children move forward. And the parents and our guardians, those that have been helping, have been doing the same thing. The only caveat that will cause a child to fall significantly behind is if they don't have the support when they're going back into the learning environment. That's the caveat. Of course, there are different variants when you're dealing with children with special needs, when you're dealing with those that were in pre-K and that were, going into K. You can't sit a 5-year-old in front of a computer 8 hours a day. It's just not going to work, for them to actually learn. So there are different learning modalities and different ways to keep them engaged versus some of the other things that we can do for the children learning at other ages. So that it's very important to understand that. Don't get caught into that, to thinking that your child is going to be so far behind. Children are some of the most resilient people on this planet. They are able to bounce back from things that we sometimes can't even imagine. So give your children, that space to be able to bounce back from this experience. So want to definitely, share that with you. There's, unless they don't have that support, they're not going to really experience a whole lot of learning loss. If you've seen in the last year that your children have been struggling with certain components, I can pretty much bet my last dollar that those were components they were struggling with in some aspects prior to the pandemic. And so every lesson has certain components that go with the other. Lessons are like building blocks. And so you may be at the top and you may have just really scarcely made it from the previous block. But if you go up further and that one that you scarcely made it through, this might become too top heavy, then that one that you scarcely made it through is going to start wobbling. And so it's going to signify there needs to be some readjustment in that area. So I wanted to share that first. And then as it relates to, what you want to do, I think is an amazing opportunity to serve the community. We have been called ambassadors of Christ. We've been called to do the work of the kingdom. And the work of the kingdom, even though you may house it inside the church, is beyond the four walls of the church.
Absolutely.
And so I think that your idea is paramount, it's necessary, and it's honestly the way in which we should be thinking about as a community for the next few years, to assist our children, regarding what different places that they can learn, so that parents can go to work, so that they can have a safe place to learn, because there's been so many other things that have unraveled due to this pandemic. But we want to make sure our children are in safe places where they can learn. And also reach out into your congregation, utilize your resources, your teachers, your professors, your professionals. I think someone even mentioned if you got retired teachers or retired librarians, or those that were retired daycare workers, if they're in your congregation, definitely reach out to them. Also, you want to look into grant opportunities. If you 501c3, then look into grant opportunities that can give you the financial incentive. That way you're able to pay those to oversee this process. So those are just some of the channels that I would definitely say, and we can definitely talk offline about what that looks like, for you. But I think that would be a great way to establish, you not only being a man of God and Kingdom Life, not just being a church, but this is being a place that the city can come to for refuge in these times that we're living in.
Thank you. That is exactly what's in my heart. And so all of my retired teachers and educators, if you're in that area, in any area you're in, look for ways to be a blessing and to give back, because it is so needed.
Yeah.
And I certainly want to ask all retired teachers and all retired educators and those who have the time and the wherewithal to contact us, because we really want to. We're in the process already of looking at models for this and make sure that we are CDC compliant as it relates to the stipulations for COVID-19 and all of those things to be careful, and because we're in the process of starting this. God's blessed us with a new facility, and we're going to utilize it for the glory of God and for the benefit of people, because ministry is about people. And ministry is about finding the need and meeting it. And I see this as a tremendous need, because, and this may sound very, very hood, or no, I won't say hood, but it won't sound as intelligent or intellectual as I try to be at times. But my attitude is, if they flunk out of school, they're going to be hitting your grandmother in the head, trying to survive, or even worse, breaking in your house, and either it's their life or your life, or so it just, and we just perpetuating a bunch of stuff that we could head off had we just kind of paid attention and gave some attention to it, and help in some kind of way. So that's what I have a question about the educational process, and maybe this is for another occasion, but I do have a question. When I was coming up in New York, when it was identified, or it was realized that I had some musical abilities, or some, some level of gifting as it relates to that, there was a high school in New York City, Manhattan, called the School of the Arts. It's really where the movie Fame was based on. Music and Arts High School. And I was invited to go, and I was selected to go, and my mother didn't want me to ride the subway. We lived in Mount Vernon. She was afraid of me riding the subway at night, because it gets dark in New York at night quick. So I missed out on that. But the purpose of it was to hone my musical skills in an environment where people were creative and artistic, and at the same time getting the basic things that, of course, was needful and necessary. And so I was very, very interested in doing it, because I felt like, you know, to be able to play, and if you've seen the movie Fame, you know what I'm talking about. They sang, they played, they danced, and they had to do their work. You know,
Right.
they had to get their basic things done, but it was also an environment that breeded and cultivated their gifting. How do you feel? I see, as I've moved to the South, I don't see much attention given to those children. And so they are sometimes locked in to these areas that they have no interest in. And as a consequence, they don't do well. They just don't do well because they're not motivated. I mean, I knew playing basketball in high school, I could not have less than a, I don't know, I think the standard was C. My father's standard was B, you know, so it was like,
Right.
or somewhere C plus, somewhere in there, you know what I'm saying? And so at Fame, you could not be flunking English and mastering dance. You know, that
Right.
just wasn't going to happen.
Right.
And so, what can we do? Or is there anything I just don't know about? But is there anything?
Well, around the early 2000s, which is interesting because when I came into the field of education, um, a lot of stuff was changing. Curriculum, budget cuts, just
Mhm.
so much was changing. And one of the things that was changing, which was disheartening, was the budget for the related arts curriculum.
Mhm.
So, all of your dance classes, music classes, art classes, the budgets were being cut left
Wow.
and right, specifically, in South Carolina and in other states as well. And so, where you don't have that, for students to really, take those classes and begin to master their unique skills, again, they end up being forced into learning other aspects, and that's why if you actually study, and Sam actually did some studying on it, and my background probably can help highlight some of the stuff that you see when you look at college retention, because a lot of times these children they went to study something in college that they already never really had interest in, because they were pushed into a lot of these STEM fields. And we do need representation in the science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Awesome. But
Yes.
it also almost made them one dimensional.
Yes.
Like you can actually major in music and still be an engineer.
Yes.
That you can actually pair those two
Absolutely.
together, right? And
Sure.
so you
Sure.
literally can be very good in sports and still, have a background or an interest in art. Like there's still, so many ways in which those can be paired together. But if you
Yeah.
don't have an art class, if you don't have a music class growing up through, your K-12 education, you're not going to see how that can actually go together. So when the budget cuts came, a lot of our children, either if they weren't from a home where the parents put them in like private music lessons, or private, like AAU was on the rise during that time as well. So like these private teams, track teams, basketball teams, football teams, if the parents couldn't afford to put their children in those specific areas and they didn't have access to it at those schools, then you had this idea of where, I'm going to graduate, I'm just going to go to college and major in biology, have no interest in biology at all,
Right.
but
Right.
that's what was fortified. And so I stay about 2 or 3 years, and if I make it through 4, I have a biology degree and I'm working at the call center at Blue Cross Blue Shield. Like,
Right.
it's just it's those things. And and that's no shade on anybody working at Blue Cross Blue
No.
Shield. Go make your money, get your check. That's all I'm
See?
saying. But what I'm
See?
saying is the dynamic is they went to spend all of this money in this specific area that they're not interested in, and not even interested in going into a field that relates to it. So I think that now, if you're in schools where your children don't have access to the arts and music, and you cannot necessarily afford to put them in those specific types of schools, which there aren't a whole lot in South Carolina, it's almost like the children would have to go to schools in other states, again, that minimally adequate. So you're not going to get too much of those type of schools in South Carolina because it's not a requirement by our state. So find different teams and get together with community teams where you can expose your children to that. Even church. I grew up in church where, we were exposed to musicals and actually learning music through the musical director at our church. We were learning how to speak. I learned how to be a speaker from one of the deaconess in our church. She saw that at an early age, I was articulate, having conversations with adults at a young age. And every time it was time for a church conference, we want to send Demetrius to go speak. We're going to spend, and so she literally trained me how to write my speech, look at my words, look up at the audience, engage with the audience, make sure that they can feel the passion that I'm saying. Like, she trained me, and it was a deaconess in my church. My parents, grandparents couldn't afford me to send me off to a special type of performing arts school, but it was the women and the people in our church and our community that saw the giftedness and said, let's cultivate that, because she's going to represent this community one day. And so
I need to open a fine arts academy.
I think that if that's
Let
what
me
came
write,
to your heart, you better write it down.
Just write the vision, make it play.
Write that down, because you have, music. You've been around the greats.
I don't know about that.
the great ones. So that would definitely be, and you have some amazing people around you. In the Orangeburg area and in the Orangeburg County area. There's so much great talent, in Orangeburg County. I'm from Orangeburg County. So, there's so many amazing people that can really give their expertise. And guess what? Some of them have this stuff even as adults and don't know what to do with it. They have these musical gifts or these athletic gifts, and they don't know what to do with it. Guess what? If you create that school or that program, then you got people in your community that you can hire immediately to come work in your institution or your academy.
Whew, I'll be up all night. I know that right now. My wheels.
You need a team.
This is too much. Oh my God.
You need a team. You need a team.
Well, listen, if you out there, you want to be on my team, you heard Dr. D say I need a team. So come join the team. Because I really do feel this. I really do. In this season of my life, I'm more interested and more passionate about this, because for me, this is ministry. Absolutely. This is ministry to me. I have preached for almost 40 years of my life now. Mm-hmm. And I thank God for it. And I'm grateful. And I'm still blessed by, the fact that he uses me to do that. But I want to feed who's hungry. I want to educate who's not learning.
And I was going to say too, Pastor, you're in the vein. You said something when you started this conversation about the sons of Issachar and those that were able to discern the times. You're in the vein of where we need to go in ministry.
Yes.
And I think it's beyond just the terminology or just church and just ministry. But what you sound like you are really ready to hammer down is your legacy.
Yes.
Your legacy beyond the pulpit.
Yes.
The legacy and longevity of what Pastor Rowson, will be known for, in addition to what you planted for the last 40 years. And this is what will be passed down to your grandchildren.
Yes.
And so this is the idea of where, because I work with pastors. And so many pastors and leaders who have been in ministry for quite some time are feeling this awakening to a different side of what ministry looks like. Ooh. And so those of us like myself who are in marketplace are saying, guess what? The time is now, because the pandemic did just that for us. Even in church, we couldn't gather in the building. So we had to find alternative ways to get the word of, God out, to get the gospel out, to get the same effect. And I believe it was a setup and God trying to help us shift into a different perspective of how to reach his people. Absolutely. And so what you're doing, I believe, is so amazing. And like I said before, you definitely need a team of people that will help you build this. And I believe that this won't take long. God has already provided with the new building space. He's already given that. He's already provided that. So now it's time for the infrastructure of what's going to happen in this new building space. Yeah. And so I believe that's where you are. And so that's just my prophetic pivot there, that I wanted to share.
Lord. Thank you, Jesus. Yes, Lord. I
There,
receive.
I am who I am, whether it's in or out of the classroom. I'm always going to be what God has called me to be, no matter what platform I'm on. And he's going to have his way. And I wanted to share that because I really felt that so strongly when you begin to share so passionately about doing this work for education to close the gap on the inequities until we're able to do it at the larger level. What he's saying tonight, for those that are listening, he's going to do what he can at his level to close those inequities, as those of us who've been called to work at larger levels, and as he becomes a part of that larger conversation as well in closing these gaps of inequities here in our state. So just kind of wanted to share that and give just some summation to what's really happening here in this conversation. This is a conversation that will turn into action and fruition. And for those of you all who are listening, I saw a lot of people saying, call me, I'm with you, Pastor. That's what he needs. He needs a team. He needs people that's going to support the vision and make it come to pass. It doesn't have to take long at all. God has a way of expediting things, and Pastor Rosen is already there.
I so appreciate you. Oh my goodness, this is so God. And I often, as I teach kingdom and what kingdom really means, there's no really separation between the secular and the sacred. Whatever God has put in you, you're called to it. And wherever he uses you, you're as significant outside the church walls as you are in. And he gave some, and all four, so we understand that then there is no secular, you're not a secular professional, you're a kingdom professional. And I so appreciate you, Dr. D. Bishop Reginald Davis, Dr. Reginald Davis said on here that he would serve as my educational consultant. He's been in education and higher education, I believe, or administrative education, or whatever you want to call it. He's been the head. He's been the boss for a long time. He's my brother in North Carolina. Yeah, he's in education. He's the man, and I'm going to call you Bishop because I feel really strongly about this. The hymn of the church that we have sang for years said, "How to reach the masses." I have posed to my leadership at the church that is a question. It is not just a statement. It is a question. How do we reach the masses? And I think that all of these things are going to help us reach the masses, men of every birth. And I don't want to cause an insurrection. I'm not going to go and try to climb up the walls of the State House downtown on Gervais Street or anything like that. But I really do want to talk to my legislature. You gave me an idea. I want to talk to our legislators and say, what's going on with this law? How is it okay for us to be mediocre? And y'all are good with that. That's a problem. Dr. D, your time is invaluable. And I appreciate you so much for lending your voice to this conversation and giving us your wisdom and your insight. And listen, you guys, if you have been blessed by the wisdom and the knowledge of Dr. D. Bell Williams, I need you to do me a favor. I need you to comment right now and let her know how much of a blessing she has been on this here live tonight. And I also want you to consider sowing into our ministries so that we can be a blessing to her as well. So listen, this is the kind of information that people pay registration for. This is the kind of setting that people, a person of her caliber, people pay the cover charge or whatever you want to call it, registration, subscription, whatever, to hear a person of her renown just share for a few minutes. And most of the time they don't share this long. They do not share this long. And so she has unselfishly given of herself and her time and her experiences. I often tell people, when you get my time, you get my life, because whatever I'm sharing has been birthed out of life experiences, and the skill set comes from life. So don't mishandle my life. don't disrespect my life, honor my life. And that's what it is. And so I want you right now, I need my Cash App to ding. I need to see you that are sowing right now. Give us an uh, accountability text. Let me know that you were going to sow. Sister Charity, First Lady Charity Davis says he's been in education. Bishop Davis has been in education for 32 years. I think he knows a little bit about what he's talking about.
Absolutely. That's amazing. Congratulations, Bishop Davis. That's
He's phenomenal. He's a phenomenal preacher, phenomenal teacher. And so I'm grateful for his life and his friendship. So listen, do that right now. Come on, let Dr. D know. Talk to her. Let her know that her life has not been in vain, and all of her experiences have brought her to this place where she can speak truth to power and to give us insight to take us further. So why don't you do that right now? Thank you, Dr. D, for your time again. We're about 4 minutes over, but I'm grateful. I'm grateful. And we'll be talking very soon, because I do believe in putting legs to words. So,
absolutely. I'm the same way. Absolutely. Yeah. You're quite welcome. And, just to the audience, thank you so much for you all for watching. And, I know you heard me talk about it, and you're sowing into Pastor Rosen's ministry. And I just appreciate all the feedback, all the questions. I really, really do. This helps us get better, to know what people are needing to know, what questions they have. This helps me as a researcher continue to ask the right questions when I'm in the right rooms, and so that I can petition not only on behalf of the residents in my county, but also the residents in your county as well, because we all make up the state of South Carolina. And while you're out there, and when you get a moment, I do want to share to make sure that you go get a copy of my book, Culture Focused Teaching. It's out there on Amazon.com, Culture Focused Teaching. So make sure that you go get a book, and it'll be good for you. And I think Miss Curtis Q was on here, my friend TK, she was on here. She actually got her copy. And even if you don't have children in the district, your children are already graduated, you have grandchildren, or you are, working with someone who has children, it's a good read, and it's good information for you to have as you are an advocate and a supporter for children. Buy one for your children's teachers, so that they can have it in their teacher toolbox. So just wanted to share that as well. Of course, those of you all, you can reach me at social media. I'm right here on Facebook at D Bell Williams, or you can find me on Instagram at Dr. D Unlimited. And so I'd like to definitely connect and just, stay in touch with all of you all. Again, thank you so much, Pastor Rosen. This has been amazing. It's been truly amazing.
Thank you. And let's not do what we typically do and get all this information and go, yeah, and don't do it. I need you to go and connect with her right now, request friendship, whatever it needs to happen. Add her to right away. Let's not even sleep on it. Let's do it right now. I'm going to get off here and order my book right away. Let's do it right now. That's what you make happen for someone else. God will definitely make happen for you. So let's do that. All right. Father, thank you so much for this night. Lord, this has gone beyond our expectations. You have exceeded our expectations. Your word declares in Ephesians 3:20 that you are able to do exceeding abundantly above that which we can even ask or think. And it's according to the power that's already working in us. And we thank you for manifesting that word tonight. We thank you for Dr. D and her life and her life's work. And we thank you as she is committed, so committed to the work that you have assigned to her hands. Now bless everything she puts her hands to do. Bless her family, her home, in the name of Jesus, her business. Let it flourish even in this time. I thank you for what you're doing in the life of these your people who have gathered to hear such awesome information. I pray that you would bless us now and keep us in the middle of this pandemic. I know that you're more than able to do exceedingly and abundantly above that which we can even ask or think. And we thank you for it now. In Jesus' name, and be glad or say amen. Amen. So thank you. Thank you again. And everybody have a great night. And I'm going.
Good night, everybody.
Night.